Hey everyone, greetings from Brno here in the Czech Republic. I wanted to circle back for today's video on a grape variety that I cannot get enough of. I keep tasting these wines from different producers and I am just so in love with this grape that I wanted to share more of them with the world. So for today's video, I am circling back on Welschriesling, or as it's known here, Ryzlink Vlašský. It also goes by Vlašák, kind of its colloquial nickname here in the area. But for me, this grape is just so versatile and shows such a wide range of styles, from sparkling to dry to semi-sweet, all the way to ice wine and straw wine. I mean, this grape is so malleable, and personally, I always kind of prefer the drier style of wines in general. But Welschriesling can lend itself to beautiful dessert wines, some of which I was really lucky enough to try when I was in Austria. So speaking about the grape a little bit, the grape is of Austrian origin. It's been grown there for centuries. It was transplanted here around the 13th, 14th century, and it has absolutely no relation to Riesling, to the Rieslings we know from Germany. Its name is kind of deceiving, Welschriesling. When I first saw it too, I thought it was related in some way to Riesling, but there is no relation to the Riesling that we know from Germany. So Welschriesling has its own identity, its own character. The dry styles I love because they show this yellow fruited character, yellow apple and quince fruit. Again, because of that malleability of the grape, it can lend itself to oak aging, to batonnage, to lees aging, and you can develop really complex, deep flavors from this grape. So I am on the Welschriesling bandwagon, and I am hoping to take you along with me for this long Welschriesling ride. So for today's video, I wanted to show two producers that I've been lucky enough to meet over the past few weeks, one of whom I've met a ton of times, but is Vykoukal. I just met about 2 weeks ago, and their wines just astound me with their complexity and depth and finesse, and I'm so happy to talk about them here today. So for today's Welschriesling Vlašák, Ryzlink Vlašský episode, I'm happy to start off today with Jan Stávek. So this is Jan Stávek's Vlašák. Vlašák, again, is just the kind of colloquial nickname for Welschriesling or Ryzlink Vlašský. This is the 2017. So Jan Stávek's winery is in Velké Nemčice, which is in the sub-region of Velké Pavlovice. It's a tiny village. In fact, it was one of the first places I visited in South Moravia over a year ago. And when I got off the bus, I really was in the middle of nowhere. This village is tiny. There's probably under 1,000 people that live there. But Jan Stávek's family has been making wine there for generations. So he's fourth generation winemaker. He does everything at the winery. He has written books about wine, about rosé. He's very knowledgeable, very easygoing, kind of a down-to-earth guy, and I love his wines. So regarding this Vlašák, he actually purchased this fruit from Mykolaiv, the neighboring sub-region, just kind of southwest of Velké Pavlovice, about a 30-minute drive. Welschriesling grows very, very well in Mykolaiv. Mykolaiv is one of the renowned places for Vlašák. And henceforth, Jan Stávek purchased his fruit from a reputable grower and vinified the wine himself. His Vlašák sees just under 2 years of oak maturation in a 1,500 liter Slavonian oak barrel. It does remain on fine lees with a little bit of batonnage, so there is an extended creaminess and complexity to the wine. Jan recently gave a tasting at Petit Cru, and so I really recommend following him on Facebook, on Instagram. You can pop into one of his tastings. It is in Czech, but his English is fantastic, so it's really easy to communicate and to have your questions answered. In fact, Jan will be pouring wine at Spielberg Castle in 2 weeks on August 13th with the Mladí Vinaři, the Young Winemakers Association. So I'll list the info here for that. But getting into his Vlašák, during this tasting, I was so enamored with this wine. We bought, I think, 2 or 3 bottles of it. It's a beautiful expression of Vlašák, of Welschriesling. So getting into his wine, the wine has a kind of medium lemon color to it, pale to medium. There's no cloudiness or sediment in the wine. In fact, for this particular wine, he uses a very minimal filtration. He wanted to keep all the flavors and aromas in the wine. And the nose is very fragrant, yellow fruit, like I mentioned, quince fruit, kind of yellow apple, some apricot. But there's a clean, kind of inviting floral note to it too, kind of a white floral note. And a small amount of kind of a floral spice, kind of like a cardamom note on the nose too. But medium plus acidity, medium plus body. But what I really loved about this wine is this kind of doughy mid-palate. Because this wine spends quite a while actually on fine lees, there's this added textural component that I just love. It doesn't go over the top. It doesn't become this creamy, buttery sensation. It's much more of like a fresh baked bread kind of doughy note to it on the mid-palate. But finishing off with a little pop of acidity, kind of a lemony, zesty acidity on the finish. Nice minerality as well, kind of a wet stone component on the palate, but definitely showing a lot of that apricot, yellow fruit, yellow apple, yellow nectarine, but still dry. This wine has very little residual sugar, if anything, I believe. Yeah, under 0.5 gram of residual sugar in this particular wine. So a really refreshing, but quite complex Welschriesling that would be so delicious with some fish this summer. Trout here is one of my favorite things. You wouldn't guess in the Czech Republic they have delicious trout, but they do. And this wine would just be the perfect accompaniment to that dish. So great wine, Jan. I love all of his wines, but this one really surprised me. I'd never tried his Welschriesling before, so always a pleasant surprise. The next winemaker I'm going to feature today, also Welschriesling, also 2017. I love contrast. This one is from Stávek, Vykoukal. So Vinařství Vykoukal is a small winery. He produces maybe 10,000 bottles a year. He is located in Hostěradský Řešov. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's near Kobylí. And what I appreciate about Stávek is that, like I mentioned, this is just his side gig. He actually has a full-time job working on the trains in South Moravia. So he just does this because it's his hobby. But he makes gorgeous wine. He is one of the leaders in the Authentic Fest, or Authentic Moravia Magna Wines Association. So these are wine producers that kind of promote this sustainable, natural winemaking, very little filtration, if any, very minimal use of sulfur in their wines, and larger amounts of used oak barrels that they use to ferment and mature their wines. With the Ryzlink Vlašský from Stávek Vykoukal, it actually sees about 10 months on gross lees in barrels. So after the wine is finished fermenting, it remains on those gross lees in barrel for 10 months. So a very deep, complex, really nutty note to it, really creamy, and a bit more of that doughy sensation. I just want to point out the color on these two because it's fascinating that these are both Welschriesling, both same vintage, and I'll hold the paper up behind. So this is Jan Stávek's, which shows that kind of medium to pale lemon color. And then this is Stávek's, which is much more deeper, kind of a golden color, but same vintage, same grape variety. Love contrast. So talking about Stávek Vykoukal, I came across his wines actually kind of through a few different channels. I started tasting his wine at Vinoteku Tri Knížat, really enjoyed them. And then I was on an Instagram live. I was just a viewing on Instagram live chat between Basket Press Wines, who imports their wine into the UK, and Alex, who's a UK Sommelier of the Year. And he said he had been to South Moravia, he had met Zdeněk, and I said, how has this guy met Zdeněk Vykoukal? I want to meet Zdeněk Vykoukal too. So coincidentally, Zdeněk was actually at an event for the Natural Wine Shop that's just opening up in about a month or two. And surprisingly, that was him, and I sat down and we met. And a few weeks later, we organized a trip to go to his winery, hence why I have his Welschriesling sitting on my table now. So the wine world here is quite small. I'm learning that every day. Everyone kind of knows each other, but everyone's very appreciative and generous and very kind and excellent wines. So I can't waste any more time. I'm dying to try this wine. So this is the Welschriesling from Zdeněk Vykoukal 2017. So like I mentioned, showing that color contrast before, this one has a deeper golden lemon color. And the nose shows much more of that baked bread sensation, doughy, more of the marzipan kind of lemon curd note to it. There is a little bit of an apricot sensation as well. But the wine shows a much deeper, nutty, bready kind of note to it. Definitely a wine I would want, certainly with a heavier meal. But there's this beautiful kind of white floral note on the back end, almost like a freesia flower. But sort of honeyed on the nose too. Really a complex nose. I'm getting a lot of flavors picking up on the nose. Shows a lot more of a creaminess, less acidity. I put this at medium minus acidity actually as compared to Jan's that has more of a pop on the finish. This is a little bit more tame. But that nutty, little bit of spice on the mid palate too. A little bit of a honeyed note as well. Again, dry. Both of these wines are really bone dry. When I say honey, I just get this honey blossom kind of beeswaxy note on the mid palate. But fantastic wines, and to have two grapes from the same variety, same vintage, grown maybe a half hour, 40 minutes apart from each other, but very different winemaking techniques, different styles, and different ways they want to distinguish themselves. So with Jan's, definitely more of a stone fruit component, lemony, fresh acidity on the finish, whereas with Zdeněk Vykoukal's Welschriesling definitely shows more depth, more nuttiness, and more kind of a creamy, less acidic mid palate to it. But fantastic wines. I am so thrilled I get the opportunity to meet the winemakers, hear their story, learn about the wines, and I get to share them here with you. So I hope everyone can try a Welschriesling at some point. I know they might be kind of hard to find. If you're in the UK, you can find Zdeněk's wine with Basket Press Wines. With Jan, I know he's importing a bit, so definitely follow him on Facebook and Instagram. I'm sure that if there's a will, there's a way. So I'm sure you can find Jan Stávek's wine somehow in this big, wide wine world. So that being said, cheers to Welschriesling. It's one of my favorite grapes. I hope everyone gets the chance to try it. Ahoy from Brno. Cheers. Ahoy.